planning board.
No, I'll stay home.
First on the agenda is acceptance of the previous meeting's minutes, which is Wednesday, December 6th. They're pretty long, because we had a whole bunch of comments.
I'll make a motion to accept.
I will
Here-
second.
Here in a first and a second, any corrections, any adjustments?
Looked good to me.
Yeah, looked good to me too. Not bad for a second run through.
I know.
Thank you.
Not hearing any changes, calling a vote.
Woman's eye?
Tamalia, aye.
Monroe, aye, and recognizing that that's a quorum of the planning board, and that absent tonight, we have, Erica and Francois are absent tonight. I also was supposed to say, planning board meetings are broadcast live and digitally recording, but every meeting is now, so I hope everyone knows that by now. This meeting is being held both in person and virtually through Google Meetings, pursuant to the new public law. Next, before we get there, any public comment for anything that is not on the agenda? All right, moving forward, new business, we have an A&R for 5 Ragged Hill Road. Can you tell us a little bit about the plants?
My name is Julian Votruba from New England Environmental Design. I'm representing the owners of the property. Right here. And what we have is a parcel of property off of Ragged Hill Road, and we're creating a couple lots off of it, which have 200 feet of frontage, 80,000 square feet. This particular one is high and dry, there's no wetlands on this property, so we don't meet all the criteria on that. Where the remaining house is this shaped parcel here, which is 8.52 acres, and it's got well over the 200 feet of frontage. If you add all those up, it's close to, close to 350, well, a little over 400 feet. And then you have a last lot down off of New Templeton Road, 200 feet of frontage, and there is some wetlands on it, so we take that out to meet your upland requirement, which is over 88,000 square feet, and we're hoping to get your endorsement.
Excellent. So for the benefit of the public listening at home, this is an A&R, which is an approval not required, essentially an exception to the subdivision rules, where we just accept a plan and sign it. We run through a checklist in order to do this, based upon plan content on what is actually in our subdivision rules. There we go. It's looking at the wrong page. So the requirements are established in section 402 of our subdivision rules. And a plan is required to show the property boundaries, north point, date, and scale.
North, boundaries, scale.
Excellent. The name of the record owner, name of the registered land surveyor, and Worcester Registry of Deeds book and page reference of conveyance to record owner.
That's all here. Company name, owner name, and registered surveyor, and Worcester Registry of Deeds, books and pages, all referenced.
Okay, and the area of each lot.
Area of each lot, noted.
Sufficient data to determine the location, direction, and length of every street and way line, lot line, boundary line, monuments, or references necessary to establish these lines on the ground.
There's monuments, various areas, stone walls, drill holes, iron pins, street lines,
Excellent.
public way.
Where practical, boundary lines of contiguous and adjacent land and the names of the owners thereof as determined from the most recent tax list.
We have all the abutters and a little projection of where the boundaries separate them as they touch our property.
Location of all permanent monuments properly identified.
They're called out where they are.
Location, names, and present widths of non-public private ways abutting the property.
There and then
suitable space to record the endorsement of the board, that approval is not required in the signatures of the members of the board.
Yeah.
Excellent. Zoning classification and location of any zoning district boundaries that may lie within the locus of the plan.
It's actually, there is a zone line, commercial zoning on this side and residential agricultural on this side.
Excellent. In the case of the creation of a new lot, the remaining land area and the frontage, and in the ownership, in the case of the creation of a new lot, the remaining land area and frontage of the and in the ownership of the applicant shall be shown. I guess that is a type of in our bylaws.
But we do have it all shown.
Yep. Just gonna make a note that we should look at the language and make sure that says what that's supposed to say there.
That's a typo?
A little confusing.
I mean, that sentence didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I was like, wait,
Those are the words that were on the
I thought
page.
you were just a little rushed, you read it a little wrong.
No, those are the words that are on the page, in the order they're on the page. Location of all existing buildings, including setback and side and rear yard designations.
All the buildings, and these are the setback lines, and there's a chart of what you require.
Thank you. Location and area of any wetlands on the lots being created by the plan, including the lot being created by the remaining land. In lieu of delineating the wetlands on the remaining land, the applicant may provide written certification from the surveyor or professional engineer who prepared the plan that the remaining parcel of land contains the minimum required upland area required under the zoning
This
bylaws.
is what we show it, I flagged this, and I actually showed how much is upland and how much is not, and that meets the zoning.
Excellent. All right, and those are the criteria under the rules. Any questions from the board?
No.
All right, we all seem to believe it meets, anybody believe it does not meet the criteria? All right, so it looks like we're gonna sign that for you.
Thank you.
You got all the requisite markers?
We do.
All right, so we usually do this through receiving line over the other side of the table. Do you have the
Mylar.
the Mylar on top?
That's the one you're looking for. Nice white background.
Sure.
What happened?
Let's do the what?
It's actually very nice to have a list like you have, cause most towns don't, and then you got 5 opinions on whether this plan meets the rules or not.
Wow.
So there goes 2 hours.
We've been doing this since I've been on.
Can't see the house.
That's not, every town has
500 feet
that,
down.
and it's like,
Secret.
just make a list.
According to your bylaws.
According to your bylaws, and if I'm missing something, shame on me.
We're just signing this one?
And that, there's another
No,
point.
we did. What's
We-
that?
There's another point that
Sign
appears
contract,
on
you don't sign
our
the ones that are
informal
gonna go
list
to my
that wasn't
office?
actually
believe we only signed
adopted
this
within
one.
the subdivision rules, calling out the box that you put there, that compliance
Yeah.
with zoning, blah, 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 so on and
Yeah.
so forth.
Do you wanna put the date? This date on the bottom.
Today is January 3rd.
I will do it. Today's January 3rd, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
2024.
I know.
Yes.
I wrote a check today and I was like, eh.
I think it's still 2021 or 20, right?
No.
2018 last thing I knew.
Alrighty.
I just graduated high school. It's been 20 years now. 1968.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Here it's pizza.
Why you guys
There you go.
You're all
Thank
set.
How many of these
Did you-
hard ones do you need?
We need one for the office.
We need one for the office, so if you could just leave me one, I would do
Yeah,
the best.
then
Chris,
I'm
why
sure
did
everyone
they
does, that
sign
is
the
filled with
other blank?
plans.
We want 3 copies. One being the
Three,
Mylar.
one.
Why aren't we signing the paper?
If you need anything else,
Uh,
don't hesitate to reach out.
We used to sign.
Oh, I
We
guess,
used to, but
yeah.
it's just so if I can interject on that.
Rob, yes.
The only real document is the one that gets recorded.
Okay.
Because if you had a paper one and it's not recorded, you can't go to the registry with
Yeah,
that.
the Mylar gets recorded, right?
So my lie gets recorded, so now it's on record. If you want one with your signatures on it, it's very simple, and you can
I
get
was gonna
one.
say, I thought the last time we determined we only had to sign the Mylar, so.
That's right.
Yeah,
it.
because it wouldn't actually be a copy of the
Right.
official, it would be a
Right.
second.
So it can't be recorded on
Yeah.
the white one either, so.
How many hard copies do you want?
I just one,
Just one?
just the one.
All right.
Trying to limit the amount of paper.
And the other thing is, I'm glad you have that food, because if this gets wet and smears, then we'll be good. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see you
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Soon, I hope.
Just excuse me, I'm just gonna make sure that this gets to the correct locale.
Why, you think it might get lost?
Nothing ever gets lost here, what are you talking
Yeah.
about?
Paper never gets misplaced.
There's an elastic right there on the table.
What?
Right here.
Oh, I knew I
So-
had rubber bands.
See?
Thank you.
So moving,
Moving along.
we're going to, some more administrative matters. Discuss feedback on the rural overlay public listening session. So I guess I'll kick off kind of the discussion on that. Having some time to think about it, it kind of highlighted a couple things that we were talking about early in the subcommittee. Really about how the whole thing should be structured and how they were there are some fundamental questions. So when we started the process, we started it looking at a agricultural accessory article. And specifically, we looked at Rutland's and we looked at Bolton's. And they'd done them as separate articles because it was being done essentially as an expansion list of accessory uses. And what ended up triggering that was the fact that somebody fell into essentially that Schedule F bucket where they had an actual Schedule F for farm income. So what I kind of want to talk to the board about is we have some more work that we need to do on it, and we agreed that we're gonna have Bill Murray help us out with it, and I'm gonna reach out to Mark and see if he's willing to help us out with it some more, because he originally started as a volunteer working on that project before he was actually employed by the town. So I'm gonna check, he actually emailed me some thoughts, so I'm gonna see if he's willing to volunteer to work with him.
Who is that?
Mark Kresge. And see if he's willing to take a look at it too, because I think there's, and this is just my opinion, and I'm opening it up for discussion, because we can only talk about this in open session, is I kinda think we need to look at potentially two pathways forward for it. The first pathway would be to just take some of those changes and actually put them into our ordinary schedule of uses, and essentially run through a little bit of the analysis that Tom had actually brought up. It's like, well, where do some of these uses break down under our current bylaws? And some of them break down on the definition of accessory and on the definition of home occupation. So maybe that's what we need to fix. The other pathway, so that's pathway one. The other pathway is to restructure the draft as it is and make it clearer that what we're talking about are things that are specifically accessory uses. Because it doesn't necessarily call that out right now, it calls it out as uses. So those are essentially the two pathways, and I think what we have now, it did go through MRPC, and those folks are pretty experienced professional planners, and they do think it would clear the Attorney General as it is, but from the feedback of the hearing, yeah, I think we also should just look at some of those more fundamental issues that are hiding out in our zoning that's causing it. So I kinda wanted to bring that up in front of the board and kinda see what everybody's temperature is. Cause we're also in a relatively short time frame for this.
Right.
We have to get something on the spring meeting, which means that we have to be sending this to the select board next month. So
Great.
I wanna kinda get feedback from the folks that are here on what they think about it. If one of those paths is preferable for you, or whether or not, frankly, doing some kind of hybrid of the two paths.
I really think we need to look at all of it, maybe put it together in some aspects and keep it separated in other ones, but we don't have it overlapping, because that was what I was hearing from a lot of people, and Tom brought it up too. We do have zoning that specifies part of it, but we don't wanna overlap it or go against what one goes against the other. I think we really need to look at that, just to make it so it's definitive. So does that mean we open them both up at the same time and go through them both? Oh, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'm hearing what you guys think before
Okay.
I decide where my opinion's gonna end up in it.
It almost seems like we need to do both. Like, we can add some things to the existing thing, but then we also need more things added in a separate part.
That's kinda what I'm saying, yeah.
Right, so we could make a quick fix for the next month with adding some really important uses to our existing one, and then work on redrafting what we've already come up with later for the next voting session.
That makes sense. Quick fix.
Because we don't have a lot of time to
No, we don't.
to do anything, right? So if we wanna focus on the important ones that we really wanna see added, that we know everyone's gonna agree with to our existing uses, we could get that through quickly for next month, and then redo the entire thing and relook at every line of it for the next time we vote.
Peter?
I agree with John.
Yeah, cause I,
Address the quickies.
yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
we
with
gotta
the-
put.
With the existing, address the obvious and add it to the existing, and then look at it longer term,
Then
more
we'll sit down and
definitively.
look at it,
Yeah, because the
Give it a
primary.
timetable.
The primary concern to me is we can't leave the farm folks kinda hang in high and dry, and those are the folks where I think it's easier to define what they're doing as
Right.
as an accessory use, and maybe those are the ones that should be in the article, the ones that are more specifically farm accessory, and then maybe the stuff that's more on the ecotourism side, where it's not secondary to a farm use, maybe that should be in, that should actually be in the Article 4. And the stuff that's in the more classical kind of rural, not rural, agricultural accessory bylaw, like you see in Rutland and some of these other towns, that should exist in a separate section.
Right.
And I think that answers some of the feedback we had, like, to make sure that we're going far enough on some of the stuff. The other thing, and we're gonna talk about it later, is when you start making changes to the allowable uses and you're bundling other articles with it, the Attorney General's office can really mess things up. And we're gonna talk about that later on in the meeting. We'll come
First
back
thing
to it.
first?
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be our current experience when we get down to matters not reasonably anticipated by chair. But that's kinda what my thoughts are. And Nate, I think you had a.
Just wanted to point out that any changes, any supplemental changes will likely have to happen either 1 or 2 years from now. Cause I know that the chair was hesitant to send out any substantial changes at a special town meeting. So just remember that we're talking 1 to 3 years out for anything that we don't take on in the short term.
Can I just remind you from the reason why this all started was.
Can name for the record.
Oh, sorry, Katie Young, Ragged Hill. The reason why this all started on the EDC was because our previous building commissioner, pretty much would shut anything down if he saw it happening due to interpretation of our bylaws because they're so vague. So if we have a person that doesn't want to nail things to the wall, then it will be okay. But if we have somebody that wants to interpret it in a different way, because our bylaws are so vague, most of that stuff on that list will never happen in this town. So it depends, that's why this all started, so that's why it was so on its own. And I know that some of it says we can do it, but because it's vague, he said no.
Yeah, I certainly hear that feedback. We're all recovering from those years And it is one of the things that actually got me really interested in it as a project, because the phenomenon that I could see happening then was lots of people were doing these things, they just weren't doing any of the right things. So like they were setting up these businesses, they were not necessarily contacting like the Board of Health for like some of the other things they were putting in, and they were operating them kind of outside of the normal stream. So the idea was, well, these people are doing most of the people who were doing these things. It was kind of fair and reasonable, and like it was clear to me that the problem was with the way our rules were being enforced and structured, and not with necessarily what people were doing. Now there's exceptions, like there were some larger venue things that, well, I don't need to get into specific examples now, but we all know that there were some examples where it was like, okay, this is reasonable, but a lot of the stuff was, like some of the little farm stands and such, and yeah, to Katie's point. Yep.
I think there's a world of difference between a farm stand and
For the record, name and.
My name's Tom Robinson, Brigham Street.
Thank you.
Sorry about my voice, I can't project very
No
well.
problem.
That's okay.
I think there's a big difference between a farm stand and a 350 person event that happens 4 times a year on in what, according to the overlay district, is anywhere. I think it's going to impose on the neighbors of such a place greatly. Weddings and whatnot start out great, nice holy ceremony, and end up in a midnight loud band party. And if that goes on too many weekends in a row, I think you're gonna find a lot of people complaining. The other whole thing about this is, even in our existing bylaws, is the issue of enforcement. Does a person have to announce that there's gonna be a function at his place? Or does it just happen? And when it's happening and it looks to be out of hand, do the cops get called? Are the cops our enforcement? I don't think that's the greatest approach. But that's what often happens. And then that's conflicts between neighbors and whatnot, and it just deteriorates from there. So I would be all for farm stands, et cetera. But when you get into these bigger events, I think you're really talking about something that goes way beyond a farming-related activity. Much of these kind of conflicts arose in Barry at a couple events. They got pretty heated discussions.
Yeah, they, well, at Lancaster too, it came up with
Oh, I'm
kind
sure
of
it's
farm.
numerous communities.
Specifically with like the Warrior Dash events, because they were getting 10,000 people out at those, just absolutely insane numbers shortly before COVID. And the market's kind of collapsed since, but I hear what you're saying. Hudson had an issue because of Brazilian rodeos.
I don't even wanna ask.
No, it's actually a rodeo, just put on by a company from Brazil. And
Let's have one.
it got permitted as an event, and the number of people that showed up was like 25,000, like just, it was an insane
They come as one big
amount of
family.
people who showed up to it. But like, so.
If you're gonna do short-term, not short-term, if you're gonna do effective incremental change, for instance, the woman that was here for the information meeting, she didn't even know that she could do what she wanted to do. No change required. But there's a lot of auxiliary use related things that I think could be made clearer and made simple and open up a lot of opportunity for the small business person in town.
I would beg to differ, she wasn't allowed to do what she wanted to do, cause she wanted to have employees.
Yeah.
You can have an employee.
One, she wanted
Well,
3 to 5.
Then there's a
Yeah.
simple thing,
Yeah.
change the law to 3. You know, I mean, or she could have come for a special permit, or excuse me, a zoning law, what do they call it?
Variance?
Zoning Board of Appeals. She could have come in and
Variance.
said, gee, I want 3, you only let me have 1. will you? You know, these aren't hard issues.
Well, thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Thank you.
In
Thanks, Tom.
response to Mr. Robinson's secondary quote about larger events, I ask that we remember some of the struggles that this town is having, both financially and from an economic development standpoint. Having events and allowing different people to do things on, that they could not do currently on their parcels, on their property, may bring people to town that say, hey, you know, I'd buy that, or I would do that, or I'd consider doing X, Y, and Z, which I think is more the end game than allowing so-and-so to have a rip-roaring wedding. And I live right next to a wedding venue and I don't hear them almost ever. So I hope that we can turn some of these events and potential auxiliary uses into further economic development as we move along years and years and years and decades.
Yeah, it's all about how you do it, and what rules you lay down, how you enforce them. If you invite 100 people and 300 show up, what do you do?
So, I think there's also kind of a threshold question we need to look at while we're making some of these edits, is that there's some stuff that's appropriate for zoning and there's some stuff that's appropriate for general bylaws. And lots of other communities have general bylaws that talk about things like amplified music, that talk about like particularly event permits. So whether or not something is allowed from zoning, that's really just setting the restriction that runs with the land. If the select board was to have a general bylaw about events or about amplified music or about permit fees for those kinds of things, which is pretty typical, especially when you have somebody who's potentially coming in for a one-day pouring license anyways, that those are possibly select board issues and not zoning issues, but obviously the two have to work together.
As you know, we're aiming to fix a lot of the existent zero-sum games, not create more.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
How do other communities do this? How do they put it together and how does it work for them? We're not the first community trying to look at doing this and make it right. How does everybody else do it? Gardner has the PACC in Templeton over there, and they have all these different venues they have operating, and they look like they function okay and with the public. What are they doing that we can learn that they do and set our rules up so they fit into place and do all that and they flow properly? That's, to me,
So-
They sell tickets and get head counts.
So I can.
so how do they allow that?
I can answer some of that.
Okay.
So, if something is an actual venue, which is what we tried to capture when somebody's having events more than 4 times or events over the size, then they're an actual venue. Like, that's a thing that they do at that place of business.
Okay.
It's normal for them to have that capacity.
Okay.
If you have somebody who's having that event less than 4 times a year, they're having a special event, not necessarily at a property that's designed for it, and that other communities take care of through special event permits that don't
Okay.
run through the planning board, that go
Right.
along with a plan to the fire department, a plan to the police department, the one-day pouring license, like all of that stuff. That's usually done at like a city clerk, or if you're in a
Basically,
city.
what they did
or at
like
a
at the
select
rec
board
field a
level.
few times.
Yeah.
Okay.
and that's how like Oktoberfest in the center
Right,
of Gardner
right.
happens. It's all
Yeah.
permits through different offices.
Right. And on the other side of that coin, I think we should make it easy for people to do and not confusing. Over the years, I've been on all these boards, and a lot of people come in and they say, everybody tells us we gotta do this, and then they say we can't do that because we have to do this, and they're very confused. I'd like to make it easy for people. They can come in and say, this is what I have to do, and hit every base once, that's all.
From the, yep.
But when you put an overlay district over the whole town, as you're proposing, that means every residential property is a venue. That's not a
Not a good
PACC in a commercial area down a road with good parking. That's a house on a street. That's pretty wide open.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we'll certainly look at while we're making some of these drafting edits, cause like I mentioned at that meeting, that essentially was a number that was pulled out of the air, in order to set the conversation and kinda get what people's feedback was. It wasn't it's not a final proposal, it was a starting place for discussion.
I wasn't talking just the number, I was talking the geographic location. It's any house on the street could do it.
Yeah, but only 4 times a year, I don't think that's unreasonable.
Only?
It had to be a farm.
Yeah.
Right.
You're not, the
I
Joe
don't
Blow
think that's
over here isn't a
unreasonable,
farm.
but that's my opinion.
Well, we're gonna take a look at that as we go through and edit. I imagine what we're gonna see in the next couple meetings is gonna look, a bit
Little
different from what
I
it
think
used to.
Tom's afraid of doing an overlay for the whole town, and I can see his reasoning for that, but if it's only farm areas we're talking about, I don't have a problem with everybody in town having a right to have a farm. I really don't have a problem with that, so that's another thing we should put into the piece, and look at and make it, see if we can make that work for
But
everybody.
it's proper licensed farms, not just so-and-so's farm.
Yeah. Well, and I spoke about it, earlier, that when you see these as standalone articles, or as overlays, so, like in Rutland, it's not even done as an overlay, it's just done as an article that applies to all districts. So, there's no carving out parts of the map, it is, if you have a farm, you are now eligible for all of these uses. And if your farm is over this size, you're now eligible for all of these uses. And these few particularly intensive ones, you're now, eligible for a special permit. So, if it might be the device is not an overlay, it probably is the hybrid approach like we've been talking
Right,
about,
right.
where there's some Article 4 changes that need to happen. And then the actual accessory article maybe isn't an overlay, and maybe it has a different gatekeeping device other than where the district is, that it has to be an accessory use, or it has to be a recognized farm use under MGL. Now, I think where we kind of pulled that back a little bit as the committee is because there are some farm uses that can be very small and still very profitable, like garlic farming, that you can actually have like a half-acre garlic plot and be making pretty good money off that. So if you have a half-acre garlic lot going in Pinecrest, should you be able to have like all of, and that was actually what led to carving out Pinecrest in the overlay. And maybe the answer is some of the other, either way, I think we're pretty clear on where the pain points are,
Mhm.
so I don't think we need to belabor the point, and I'll work on them with Mark and Bill, and I'll bounce them back off of MRPC, and we'll come up with a new proposal based upon the feedback. and,
Okay.
Presented at either the next meeting or the meeting after, as long as the board, deems it so to delegate that out to draft with them.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
So be it.
Excellent, so
Thank you,
let's move on from that item. Tom, I don't know if you were planning on leaving early, but if you were, don't, because you're gonna be interested in some of the stuff out of the Best Buy law that we're gonna talk about later, under the matters not reasonably anticipated by chair.
I'm all in. I didn't know I was, but I am now.
Tom, you told me you were leaving, no?
Yeah, no, it's an example of how splitting, we'll get there, it'll be worth listening.
Is it
So.
painful?
Yeah.
Everything with the state's painful.
Yeah, it is. Ongoing planning board ledger, so we have this document that everybody was provided, and it's the chart of accounts.
Last page of it?
It is the last page, because it is the last thing handed to me, I'm so terribly sorry for the.
So this document right here, once you get to performance bond and below is all of the money that essentially the planning board is keeping on behalf of people.
Okay.
And you'll see that, I believe we actually need to go get some more money from one of our applicants.
Can we spend it?
No, we can't spend it, this is money we're holding on behalf of people.
Just for the good of the order, it's flipped.
Oh.
Negative is money that we have, positive is money that is owed to the town.
Correct, because
Right, right.
if we're holding the money, it's a liability on our books,
Right.
so. So this is an answer to the question about the invoice.
Yes, that is,
This one?
yes, please.
invoice from Places Associates. And where's that on the agenda? No, you probably don't know if you wanted to recuse yourself from this one.
Probably. Can we wait till, no, we don't have to. This one right here?
Well, actually, yeah, I guess we can just bump this to the end of the meeting. So let's bump,
Yeah.
let's bump approving this to the end
Wait
of
till
the
the end
meeting.
and then you can leave
Yep.
and we'll do it. No,
Yep.
nobody can say you were here.
Yep, so let's move to matters not reasonably anticipated by chair. So, we got back our, we got back our bylaws from the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
I forwarded over the correspondence that we received to everybody. 3 of our articles got approved, no problem. 1 of them got struck down by the Attorney General's office. And the one that got struck down is the battery energy storage system bylaw. Now, where this gets annoying is the Attorney General's office has the ability to do some blue pencil edits to things that we pass. And the net effect of what they did, and we now know about this from draftsmanship, so we did a vote to approve changes, formatting changes to the bylaws, and also clean up a couple of the uses. And in doing that, we also added language, battery energy storage system, subject to the restrictions, in Article 23. When we sent this to the Attorney General's office, she was like, oh, this is an unreasonable restriction on battery energy storage systems, which it wasn't intended to be that. It was intended to be an enabling bylaw. And I don't know if there's technology issues that they're having there, because we set the size at 750 kilovolts before it became subject to regulation, and that's enough to run a good chunk of a town. And then 5 megawatts is essentially the power output of a small nuclear power plant. So.
No.
So, I don't see where their specific problem is, but it's certainly frustrating, because when they sent it back and they did the blue pencil to the bylaws, they left battery energy storage system and struck out subject to the restrictions of Article 23. So now it's just all battery energy storage systems are now allowable by special permit in all zones. So that's annoying, and we're gonna be looking into that a little bit more to try to determine what our recourse is. Because it's not our restrictions were reasonable, and I don't believe the Attorney General's interpretation of the rules on this was reasonable. So we'll put this on the agenda for the next meeting. We just got it in, so we didn't have time to get it on the agenda for this meeting. We didn't have time to talk to town council, and we didn't have time to talk to MRPC about it yet. But I'm certainly frustrated by it, and I know if Francois was here, he would be very frustrated by
Yeah,
it.
you put a lot into,
And ultimately, the intent of it was to be an enabling bylaw, not a restrictive bylaw. So, we're gonna have to dig into that a little bit more, and it's gonna require some work. It is worth noting that that is the bylaw that Athol passed just shortly before us. So, we'll get there. What else, do we have anything else for correspondence that we needed to discuss at the meeting?
I don't think so, just, I received some, from Rutland, some public, what are they called? They are called public hearing notices from Rutland.
yeah, I
So,
saw that.
Yeah.
Saw those, okay, that was it, that was the only other correspondence.
My office is working with Tricia on a fee schedule review, so that should be something that you should have in the next couple of meetings. We're doing so in all of the offices, including the select board. The planning board seems to be one of the areas where we could make the most difference in terms of revenue, so I look forward to that discussion, but just anticipate that.
Okay, so get to any additional public comment? Any additional comments from the board? Alright, and then we have a invoice for services to discuss for Industrial Tower.
If I recuse myself, you don't have a quorum though.
That's right. How do you do that?
I think you're gonna have to wait till next meeting to vote on that. And if I leave, you can't adjourn because you don't have a quorum.
Is that a
If he
good point there?
excuses himself, doesn't he become an active member?
It's on a special permit.
No, only on special permit matters.
Just
You
take a look
can
at-
not have a quorum, you can't vote on it, but you can discuss it openly.
Right, but it doesn't leave
Yeah,
us.
we just need to vote to pay it, we're all in agreement, we wanna pay it.
Right, but
It's
we
just-
can't
yeah.
do that if we don't have a full
We can't
quorum, we have to
without-
have a vote
Yeah.
to pay it, so we're gonna have to, we have to wait till next meeting, we don't have enough members, because you can't vote.
Actually, he can.
I was gonna say,
He
how do
doesn't-
I benefit
he
from
doesn't
that
have
in any
to-
way?
He doesn't have to
Well,
recuse himself. If
I've
there's
been
a-
in other hearings, where we've had attorneys here for the town, and they said that you had to get up and leave the hearing. If you're gonna, if you are any way tied to it, you cannot be here. And
The conflict of interest, Nathan, can you help me out on this? I thought.
It is a conflict
The
of interest.
conflict
Yeah.
of
It's
interest
property.
regulations talk about if there's no other alternative,
Well, if we
except
go
to
next
stay,
meeting.
then he should not recuse himself.
then he shouldn't recuse himself.
He shouldn't if
because-
there's no other way.
The safest bet if they're not shaking this down is to wait, but if this is something that really, really needs to be paid,
Yeah.
do what you must.
Yeah, there actually is one invoice for Curtis, or excuse me, for the self-storage, which I believe is, we're holding funds under Curtis Construction, is that what it is, or?
I was looking through everything. Give me 1 second. I had to dig deep. Curtis Construction, correct?
Yeah.
Is that Chris, when you brought that?
No.
It is in 36 Gardner Road. Is something I'm seeing here.
Was that for 36, isn't that the,
Storage.
oh, I was thinking it was the tower
Yeah,
across the street.
no, so 36 is the storage, so that one.
Is the storage, correct, yes, it
Okay,
is the
good.
storage,
So
I
that-
have it, yep, it is the storage.
So that one,
We can vote on.
but we can vote to approve that one, and we get Places
Can we
Associates
vote
some
to
of the
approve
money.
all of them except for the one? Can we just do that?
Well, we're supposed to vote on the individual invoices, so.
Right. So we'll table the other one.
Yeah,
till
we'll
our
table
next
the other
meeting
one, we'll do this
and
one.
vote on all of
So
them.
this one, the invoice 5464.05, is that the one you have?
Yes, 5464.05.
Alright, yes, the balance due is 1488.
Alright, so we have an invoice that is on the table from Places Associates, acting as our consultant for work related to Gardner Self-Storage. We are holding money on behalf of Curtis Construction, in the sum of $9,020. So we do have funds to offset this.
I'll make a motion that we pay it out of that fund.
Excellent, you're the first.
I will second.
You're the second. Any discussion about the invoice?
No.
Alright, so it is, let's call a vote.
Woman's eye?
Demalia, aye.
Monroe, aye. And just a note, as of the policy that we established at a previous meeting, the board is also authorizing me to sign the approval sheet with the town on behalf of the board in order to get it paid. Excellent, so we'll table the other one. And with that, that's everything we had on the agenda.
No.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Didn't you have something you told Tom we were gonna discuss, you thought he would?
The best-
Yeah, that was the best
That was-
bylaw.
Oh.
That was the what?
The best bylaw discussion.
Oh, okay.
We tried, when we split it
The
between.
Attorney General's office issue.
Yeah, when we split it
Oh,
between two
oh, okay.
votes, they blue penciled it in order to make it so it's allowed in all zones with no restrictions. When we had the article and the Article 4 amendments on different votes in the town meeting. So,
That was- you-
yes,
across the board, I think many rural towns are trying to pass laws against battery storage systems or control them in some way. And, the Attorney General's trying to make it uniform. If you look at Wendell, whatever, whole Connecticut Valley is, under the same situation.
Yeah, they certainly are. Just wish they would give us more guidance with it. And then pay for somebody to actually rewrite the bylaws for us.
Can I ask one question, or it's not on the agenda? Is there any new news about the pot farms taxation and the money to the town that we were promised that we still haven't received?
what?
Nope, and
What was the
the
subject?
the cannabis grows, and we are gonna have, their expirations of the special permits come up soon, so we're gonna have that back on our desk soon.
So if you really are interested, I can forward you what we spoke about at the select board meeting a few weeks ago, but in the most professional way possible, I will tell you, please don't hold your breath.
And
Because it does seem as if the guidance passed by the CCC is not going to be anywhere near in favor. That's something that the select board and the planning board and all of the authorities that be at the time will have to see what is released by the CCC whenever it is released. Right now, they are dealing with some internal struggles with their chair and their executive director left, and there's all sorts of nonsense, so it's kind of all in a
So
holding pattern.
basically, again, the little guy gets screwed.
I do think if hindsight is 2020, had we known then what we know now, I think things would be different.
Correct.
But the select board did not vote, but did decide to wait until we hear more
Mhm.
from the CCC to take action on host community agreements. So we will have to likely move with the special permits with Bowie and Damon prior to it going to the select board for a host community agreement re-up. So that'll be soon.
Yep, that'll be a lot of work for us.
Yep. And the
Alright.
town made a lot of money, right? I'll make that motion.
Alright, so hearing a first on a motion to adjourn, do we have a second?
Second.
Hearing a first and a second, non-debatable, calling a vote.
Woman's eye.
Denali, aye.
Monroe, aye. We are adjourned.
Happy New Year.